Welcome back to Capital Conversations.
What's the name of the show, Andy?
I'm tripping over my mic here. I hope y'all can hear me. I'm Andi Friedel. This is Marty Owings, and we're glad to have you back. Join us on Twitter or Capital Conversations.
On Facebook.
On Facebook, yep.
Yeah. David Fitzsimmons is with us tonight. David Fitzsimmons of the Emmer campaign, most recent. Well, I shouldn't say most recently, but you managed Tom Emmer's gubernatorial candidacy campaign, and you are. I guess I can say you're a frequent guest now.
Yeah, it's maybe. Is this the third time?
I think so. Yeah,
that's
frequent.
I was going to say you guys go way back.
Once it gets to 3, oh, we actually do go back.
We do
during
go back.
The campaign.
Ran into each other a few times.
Yeah, and so it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and always enjoy it when we get a chance to cross paths. But you have announced that you're going to run for the House seat in District 30B, which is Otsego, St. Michael, Hanover, the northeast corner of. You said northeast corner.
Yeah, northeast corner of Wright County,
Wright
and
County.
then one of the precincts of Hanover is in Hennepin County. So
Yeah.
they'll have to make a longer name plaque for my name.
Well, that's good. Well, yeah.
Now, has this always been in the kind of the grand plan, or did you just saw an opportunity with the redistricting?
It was never a long thought out idea to be in the legislature. In fact, I'd been pretty resistant to the idea. And then what ended up transpiring was I ended up in the Senate District 30 Senate seat was open, and the Senate District and the 30B House seat on redistricting. And I was actually down at the party offices, the GOP party offices, helping them. I was the volunteer lead on essentially figuring out how to process forward from redistricting. There's a lot of just logistical work with reorganizing party leadership and getting calls out for conventions and trying to mesh a lot of new people with each other. Redistricting kind of throws the whole thing up in the air, and
it's like confetti, isn't it?
It's like confetti, yeah. And so that was what I was doing, and I just kind of had my head down doing that, and had a few people there say, holy cow, you're in two open spots. And I go, okay, well, that's great. Well, here's what we need to do. We need to move that, and get out these letters and contact these people. And they're, and I just kept hearing that for the next few days was, as people realized it, they're like, wow, you're in. And so I did talk then to Mary Kiffmeyer, who was the.
Did you know the judges? Was that what happened?
I didn't know, and I'm sure if they knew me, they wouldn't have done the same thing.
Okay.
So.
No, I doubt that.
And I talked to Representative Mary Kiffmeyer. She was in the 30A seat, and so I just.
But yours was empty.
My House seat was empty, but I thought I'd reached out to Mary and just chatted with her about what she was thinking or what was going on, because I didn't know if there was going to be 2 seats that needed to be filled or what, or either way there'd be 2 depending on which way she went, and she indicated that she was planning to announce for the Senate the next day, this
Which
week,
she
I believe
did
on Friday, and she did so.
Yep.
And
former Secretary of State.
Former Secretary of State, Mary Kiffmeyer, yep, and her endorsement's on the 24th of this month, so just in a couple weeks. And I said, well, I'm getting a lot of people encourage me to run for House. I'm in the opens on here, and B, she joined the list of being very encouraging to do so, and so I threw together a press release and sent it out, I think, on Saturday.
Well, you know how to do all this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
You got some experience.
It's just a little different putting your own name and stuff than it is someone else's.
Yeah.
It's a little weird because I don't have to approve quotes, though. Usually
No,
I gotta
right. Now, do you have
I actually said that. Yeah.
That's right. Now, will you have a campaign manager? Or you just kind of act as your own campaign manager?
I'm currently looking for a campaign manager. So
please apply if you have
please
the right
apply
credentials.
if you're, send your references. It's going to be probably one of those situations where it's going to be difficult for someone to do. So I hope they're patient with me, because I'm going to have a hard time not micromanaging my own.
You're going to be that
and
annoying boss.
I have a lot of offers to help and a lot of people involved, and it's been great. I did get the endorsement on this last Saturday.
Right, you were saying.
And so that one step done, and moving on. But I got a lot of people involved. People setting up fundraisers. People doing press work.
How much does it cost to run for a Senate seat, basically unopposed these days?
And a state house seat.
Yeah, state house.
Yeah.
State house seat.
You're right. The spending with looking at what the limits are for raising and spending money. My anticipation is somewhere in the low 30s, 30,000. Between 30 and 32, 33,000.
Now compare that to a contested seat without. Just say there's no outside money.
Right.
You're just going
Well,
straight
usually,
at each other.
usually you're stuck with spending limits that don't allow you a lot over that. The spending
Okay.
limits are in the mid 30s
Okay.
for costs. So candidate costs can never really exceed that amount. Typically, what you'll see then in a more hotly contested race is a lot more outside money
Right.
come in, a lot of independent
Little
expenditures.
miniature super PACs,
Yes,
if you
right,
will.
things like that, with the
Yeah.
caucuses and different lobbying interests or things like that are gonna find ways to influence that race. And so the race itself between the two candidates can really never get over roughly $70,000
Sure.
for a district. But obviously it can get into the hundreds of thousands if you start
Outside
counting the
cap.
outside money.
So I'd like to get your opinion on that, because that's a hot topic nationwide, and
Right.
this issue of free speech versus these outside interests or corporate interests having a say on local elections.
Or union money.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Right. Well, one of my general feeling on campaign finance, if I had my way, I would prefer no limits, full disclosure. Would be my preference. I think it's far more important
At least
about
know
knowing where the money's
yeah.
coming from and whose it's going to. The problem with the situation we're in now is where it was actually, this end around was created for the very reform that was put in
Right.
place with McCain-Feingold. And so in an attempt to, in my mind, solve a problem, I think they actually created a lot less of what I think people really want, which is, I want to be able to look and know who's contributing
Right.
to this candidate, who's contributing to my representative. So then can I follow that money trail and see if that's influencing what they're doing?
An informed political consumer can, the
Right.
electorate can know.
And so I think
sense.
what we've seen is the attempts to squeeze limits on these. It's a bit like squeezing a balloon, and it just pops up in different ways. And we've seen it actually the money flow through ways that are a lot less disclosable and understandable and trackable, and it's much more difficult for the average person to actually follow how the money used to get a person elected, where it came from, than it ever was before. And so I think it was one of those situations of, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and call it unintended consequence.
Does that lack of transparency hurt our democratic process?
Apart
Apart from just being an uninformed electorate,
right.
does it hurt the process?
I think so. I mean, and I'll just go back. In an ideal way, I would say to limit the amount of spending is always going to be some arbitrary thing. It's never really going to work. There's always going to be some end around. And so my belief would be, without so much of the limits, as few limits as possible, and disclosure, and so people knew where it came from.
But let's do the reality is that $30,000 is about what you need to raise. Do you like knowing that this is
That's
the
what you
target
have to spend.
as opposed to
As a good
who
fiscal
knows?
conservative, is
Sure,
that where you're
sure.
at?
But the issue is now take that and put it in now, as Marty talked about, on maybe something that's considered a highly contested race. Maybe that's Senator Cruz's race. Maybe there's once you narrow down a state legislature, there's usually only so many that are in that band, and so oftentimes they become much more expensive. Well, once those candidates reach that limit, that's the only ability they have to spend there. Well, that doesn't stop the race from becoming more expensive, and then the gap that's filled into is a lot less to connect the dots between the individual legislator and the source of the money. And I think that's where, if you didn't have that limit, and it was more so that it flowed into that legislator, at least you would always have the disclosure to go back and know where it came from.
It would be a lot more clear. The path would be clear.
The path would be a lot
That's a
clearer.
great question. Let me go back in history a little bit, because I want to ask you a question about your campaign,
Sure.
Emmer campaign.
Sure.
So you started out the campaign manager for Tom Emmer's gubernatorial run. And then at the endorsing convention, everybody sort of expected Marty Seifert, he's the odds-on favorite to win.
Right.
And then because of some of the campaign work that you did, obviously a lot of credit, went your way post that, win. It was a big upset, and Emmer won. I think he won the endorsement. I think people looked at you and said, wow, here's a young guy who managed this campaign, did a great job, and then for some unexplainable reason, which you and I haven't talked about in much detail, you were sent out to pasture for the campaign. All of a sudden they decided, well, Tom Emmer, if you're our endorsed candidate, we're gonna put you, could put some big time guys on you or whatever. And a lot of people said if David Simmons would have stayed Emmer's campaign manager, we think he might have won the election. What do you make of those comments, and what happened? Why were you?
It's obviously a big compliment to anybody that says that, and I never had a campaign manager experience. I'm a hog farmer from Wright County, and
and sometimes. Well, if you're there's too many places we could go with that one. But if you're used to moving around with the pigs, I mean, you didn't get going in a pot. Right, exactly. Well, I was just going to say.
And so I think, I started Tom's campaign. I just I drove to his house and I had a phone conversation with him, and this is probably reliving, but I had a phone conversation with him after Plenty Announced, and we started going through some of the candidates, and he was trying to come up with a candidate who he thought should run. And, everyone he suggested, I shot holes in. And so then he kind of did this big sigh, and he said, well, then I just don't know what to do. Who do we run? And I said, well, I think you should do it. And, his actual response to me was an expletive that I can't. And maybe he wishes.
So surprising.
Maybe he wishes he would have stuck to that. I think his radio gig's okay, so he's doing all right.
Yeah,
But
he's doing fine.
But he said that, and I sat on it for a few hours because he essentially said no, and I thought, well, in my mind, actions always speak louder than words, and so he lives about a half hour from me, a little less. So jumped in the car, had my $500 max out check with me, and went to his house and knocked on his door. His kid said he was up at the diner in Delano, so I went over there, caught him, and handed him the check, and I said I'd like to start scheduling things for you. And so that's how it started. And I put off the taking on the title of campaign manager all the time. I kept looking for something, and eventually it just became such an implied fact that that's.
Yeah,
it's stuck, and but then we reached a general, and they got some good people in there, and I'm not going to say anything to take away from that. So.
Oh, not Reagan's rule. Jesus, here we go. But so I mean, what happened though? What actually happened that day at the endorsing convention or thereabouts, in the days that followed it? The party decided it was good for the party to have more experienced or seasoned?
Well, you definitely have there's a different component that comes in immediately after endorsements. You get the party becomes involved, and there's obviously new voices in the room and new perspectives, and we found a way forward. I found a way to stay involved as involved as I could, and ran a lot of the field operations and tours and things like that. So it was
okay. Fair enough.
And here we sit.
But let's talk about a little bit about what else is going on up here at the Capitol now. Before the show, we talked a little bit about Franson's remarks, and I'll read her quote. She was talking about food stamps and compared food stamps to feeding animals. She said, "Meanwhile, the Park Service, also part of the Department of Agriculture, asks us to please not feed the animals because the animals may grow dependent and not learn to take care of themselves," unquote. Now, she since came out and sort of did a Twitter apology. Mm-hmm. But what do you make of statements like that? And is she disconnected from the people that, the old Republican thing is, Democrats and liberals will say, they don't know what it's like to be poor. They're not engaged with the poor people. They don't understand it.
Right.
This plays right into that argument, doesn't it?
To a certain extent? It's obviously, I think, as poor choice of words, and it doesn't reflect, I believe, what the sentiment of the Republican Party is to have people attain the American dream at every level, and to not categorize any group of people even on I myself I've probably been what maybe is defined as poor much of my life, and but again I think that's something that my parents never really allowed us to embrace that term, even because it implies that you're stuck someplace, or that's a label on you, that's attached to you, that's an identifying mark. And I think even trying to get away from some of that would do us a lot better, because I think we have such this rich tradition of the American dream and this social mobility and this economic mobility, and to really get stuck on this. And I think that is oftentimes the dangerous side of some of the class warfare that's played, because I think it implies that there are these stratified classes, and I think that's very unfortunate. I think that sets artificial boundaries on people that they need to be able to break through.
Well, and I think it's one thing to say that as a candidate, and another thing to say it as the representative of all her,
Sure.
her district. I mean, because she's representing everyone in the district.
And there's
so
no
it's
doubt somebody
interesting,
collecting food stamps in her district.
Yeah,
probably, in
I
this
can't
economy.
imagine.
If you think that if the people could see the Republican Party through your eyes, those that are critical of it, those that say, here's the three candidates they threw up for president, they're all out of touch. Romney says, I'll make a $10,000 bet with you. Perry's,
Right.
If they could see the Republican Party through your eyes, from where you came from, you're a hog farmer of modest means, you grew up working every day of your life, what would they see? What's the Republican Party that you want to see, that you think people should see?
And I think that's the Republican Party that puts as much ability in the hands of the individual to make their life, what their dream is. The American dream is really more of the Americans' dreams, and it's each individual having their goal in mind and where they want to get to, because someone's goal may be to be the newscaster on NBC Nightly News, and another person's is running an amusement park, and any number of things. And I think as much power as we have as individuals to pursue that which we dream, and not have barriers placed in that way to that success as possible. I think that's really what it's about.
Do you see that some in the Democratic Party are trying to remove those barriers? I mean, are there things do you like about what the Democrats do sometimes that you wish the Republicans were doing, or vice versa? I mean,
I think sometimes in what I kind of hear out of Democrat rhetoric, I think, well, that actually sounds pretty good, but it doesn't actually seem like what you put forward in legislation, or what you block in legislation really flows into that. I mean, and that's where I see. So sometimes the talking points sound great, but when you dig down under the surface, it's something different.
so you think that there's lip service to defending the poor and supporting the unions and the working class and the middle class, but at the end of the day, you don't think that in large measure that's real or genuine, or
I think it sometimes comes off as a condescension in a way, and that's what I think. I think any of us as citizens of this country, any of us as residents of Minnesota, are very cognizant of taking care of our fellow man. I don't think that's very much in dispute. But I think, again, going back to, I think that the Republican ideal is what are the ways you can get a person to not need it anymore. That's the ideal. We don't want to keep doing the same thing again. Rather, let's figure out ways where this person has the abilities to move themselves, out of their current predicament and not need the help, is the ideal.
So I'm curious, as you're running for this House seat and thinking about, possibly sitting down there
Right.
next year, what happened, I mean, you're talking about one thing, and this is what politicians will do a lot, and then really the priority is the Viking Stadium bill.
Right.
So, what do you hope to accomplish, or what do you hope to get out of running?
No, I think that's a good point, because it's always been something that's interesting to me, and especially with sometimes you see newer candidates and they put their legislative priorities, and it's a laundry list of things, and I think, yeah, good luck as a freshman. I'm sure you're going to just accomplish all this, because most of the freshmen walk in and the leadership says, well, that's nice, why don't you go have a seat over there?
Right, exactly.
We'll tell you when we need you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, good. Thanks
And,
for
and
the
that's
honesty.
that's
Yeah.
that's how the process
Yeah, that's
works.
right.
And so I come in with a pretty good understanding of that is how it works. And so I know that there's going to have to be things that you focus on. And I think as often as possible in my focus will be on doing the things that are bigger in the bigger picture things. And because here's the reality. Minnesota was the last state that was apportioned a congressional seat. Many people don't realize this. We were a few thousand people away of losing another congressional seat. And until the 1960 census, we had 9 congressional seats. And before the 1930, we had 10. Losing congressional seats is not a good sign for a state. And what we've seen largely is the Midwest as an entire region, and especially that as more defined as kind of the Great Lakes region, has really been in decline. And it used to be that region, Minnesota, the Great Lakes region, used to be the largest contingent in Congress, nearly 40% of the congressional seats. And what we've seen then over the decades is that really that energy, that American energy, shift by and large to our west and south. And I think Minnesota has to not accept this declining Great Lakes mentality and really embrace that very much thriving, Southern and Western philosophies. And I do think that's a big part of. I just look around. I'm Minnesota born and raised, and I look around and I think Minnesota is so greatly blessed. I mean, you go to a lot of states. I was amazed the first time I went to Las Vegas, and then I drove outside, and within about 2 minutes of leaving the city limits, you'd think you're on the moon. I mean, there's nothing there, and I've had the opportunity through personal life, through my business travel, and through politics to visit so much of the state of Minnesota, and there's hardly a square inch of this state that doesn't produce.
That's not beautiful.
I mean, the natural, whether it's the natural beauty and the tourism, whether it's the logging industry, the mining, the farming.
Well, you might have your eye on a seat higher than the State House. You're sounding.
Where's your
you're
congressional
sounding
seat?
awfully. Yeah, that's
I have Congresswoman Bachmann, who I'm very happy to have as my congresswoman.
Okay, well, she can't last forever. What am I saying? What do I know?
Yeah,
but
that's what I keep asking.
I didn't
What
mean
does Owens
physically last week. Yeah, well, you and a lot of other people, including my wife, Oh, I'm sorry, sweetheart, but she'll ask that question frequently. But let me. What about the? Yeah, I mean, Andy mentioned it, the stadium deal, and that's a big. Everybody's. I want to talk to you about where you stand on the legislators, or the governor's idea that we maybe can pass over the city's decision-making process here in Minneapolis. The city council, they oppose. They want it to go to a referendum,
right?
And where the people can vote. And yet, maybe the governor and some others would like to see that process passed over. Where do you stand on that?
My general.
Even some in your own party.
Yes, yeah, I know. And my general political philosophy is based on what I believe the founders of our country, when they put forward, was really injecting as much free enterprise into even the government as possible. And I believe the way they did that was having, as you went the higher levels of government, they were actually more and more restricted. And the lower levels of government had more latitude over what they could do. And I think the reason why I see that as a basic free enterprise system is essentially then every locality is in competition with another to provide the best services that it thinks it needs to for the lowest cost to its citizens, and create economic growth that takes outpaces its obligation. And so my philosophy has always been I provide the most latitude to the lowest and defer whenever possible to the lower level of government. I think that's something that sometimes it's going to go in your favor and sometimes it's going to go against you. I will always try to keep that as a consistent thing, because I know oftentimes it becomes one of those where someone speaks
When it's
for it when it's convenient.
We'll come back to you in a few years when it's not
right,
working
there
for
you
you.
go. There you go.
But on the amendments, we talk a lot about amendments up here because that seems to be the talk of this session. It started out jobs, but now it's just become amendments. And really, it's your party doing a lot of that.
Sure.
And so let's talk about it. We've got the marriage amendment, as in the fall, but we've got this voter ID, right to work, supermajority. Is there any of those that you disagree with your party on? Is there any fundamental difference you have on amendments in general?
Well, it's interesting. I'll grab one of these things. You just talked about the stadium and having a referendum in Minneapolis, and it'd be curious of how many Democrats that are clamoring that we shouldn't have this referendum process for marriage or for voter ID are clamoring to have it for a Viking stadium.
Yeah, well, back when the Lussard, what do you call that?
Yeah,
the
legacy
funding.
amendment.
A lot of Democrats supported that.
Well, right, the majority, and that's they passed it out and they put it on. So that even isn't an issue, that I would argue as technical as a tax rate, something that can get done, in the legislature. You could have raised that in the legislature without an amendment. So I think that's something that seems to depend on who's the one doing the
doing the amending
that people are interested in, and all of a sudden have a very strident political philosophy about it.
Let me give you another side.
Sure.
I am a resident of Minneapolis.
Okay.
And so my thought is that
Can we
I'd
give
like
your
my
address out? Or
No.
I'm just teasing.
I'd like my elected officials to make that decision.
Right.
But when it comes to a stadium, I figure it's a done deal. It's not a matter of if, but when, because the money's just too big, and it's
Seems to
gonna
always
happen.
go that way anyway, right?
In something like some of these other things, the marriage amendment and the right to work, those are ideals or issues or values that you elect your representatives to make a decision on, and then
At least debate and discuss.
Yeah. in a public forum, and then you can decide whether to elect them or not elect them. Do you see any difference between the two things, or you think it's?
No, I think they're very similar. I mean, then why shouldn't your city council representatives decide right there and make the call on it for you if that's what it's for? Then why?
Because
should
I
they
think
put
there's
that?
too much money involved in it.
Well, there's always money involved in all of it.
Yeah. Well, different than like a marriage amendment. I mean, you're right. I mean, there's tons of money coming in for the marriage amendment,
Right.
but that's a values thing.
It's not
that's
ongoing
different
though. I
than-
mean, I think there's less money ongoing in that issue. Like if she doesn't get a say in it, she's going to be footing the bill for years and years to come for the stadium to be
Sure.
in her location. So
Sure.
I guess there's an argument for that for people who don't want to pay tax. As much.
You're
tax.
not buying it.
Yeah, no,
Not really. Okay.
I mean, in general, I think
But you have no objection right now to any amendments on the slate, as far as you're concerned. No difference with your GOP.
I mean,
Right.
definitely not on the marriage amendment. I think that's very legitimate definition of a core structure of our state society that I think is a legitimate thing on the ballot. Photo ID, voter ID to vote. I think that's a very legitimate function of government. We get our government by conducting elections, so it's a little bit of chicken and egg on that one, and so I think to have the Constitution involved in how to process an election is extremely legitimate, and I think it's I think it's a way that.
What
we
about
move
those
forward.
that say we've been doing pretty good for 150 years up to now?
Well, our
Our state's become more polarized, so now you get these close.
Doing pretty good.
Well, I think the Republicans held office for years and years and years in this state. The
Sure.
Democrats, held a nice spot in the Senate, but we've always had a lot of balance in the state.
Right.
Republican governor, Democrat legislator, vice versa. Minnesotans seem to like their balance.
Independence Party.
Yes,
and
yes, absolutely.
Jesse,
I remember
Back
that.
in the Farmer Labor Party.
Yes.
and-
Yeah.
Yep. Well, again, I think it goes to, we want as high a voter participation as possible. Every engaged voter that wants to be engaged, I think should. But and our franchise means something. We in this country had an ideal of constantly pushing that to enfranchise people. But the moment someone is double voting or triple voting or quadruple voting or anything else, or voting when they are not eligible, it's canceling out someone's.
But David,
someone's vote
don't
who
you
did
ever
vote.
worry that we're passing laws for the 1/100th% of people that make bad mistakes that covers the rest of the honest people in the state? I mean, this voter ID thing seems to strike me as one who's it's like a problem looking for a solution or something.
Well,
So you're going to keep more people from voting
Or a solution
to stop
right.
the
I
double
mean, does that make
voting.
sense? Do you ever worry about that or think about it?
Well, I think that's something that was very addressed in everything that they've done, is to make sure that there's every ample opportunity to provide, everybody with the ability to vote.
Fair enough, yeah.
There's no. They've made sure that there's every avenue made, to procure these IDs for anyone, and so I think it's very legitimate to make sure that the people that are showing up to vote are the very person that's supposed to be there.
Well, we're running out of time, but quickly, give me a grade for Governor Dayton. He's on an A to F. Where
Really
are you
put
at
me
with
on the spot on that.
Where are you
one,
at with the governor? How do you? I mean, honestly,
Nobody wants to answer that question,
Yeah.
Give us your
Marty.
straight assessment. I
You're tricking me
know
in
we
there.
make them though. We
Yeah.
force them to. But what's your assessment of the job the governor's doing up here? Where do you think he's at?
It'd be really difficult to put a grade.
Give it
on
a
that.
shot.
Give it a shot. Give
yeah.
him
Yeah.
a grade.
Giving him a Fitzsimmons try.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're Irish. So special days coming up.
Yeah, I know. We're very close.
That's
the
right.
national holiday.
I love it.
So I suppose maybe giving him a C would be very middle of the road.
Well,
political
I think,
answer.
but fair enough. I think he'd be happy to hear that. From
He'd be
some
happy
of
to
his
hear that from me.
From as
yeah,
well.
I
from me.
tried to get him out there.
Really? Yeah. Well, he might be happy about a C at this point, but we appreciate that.
All right.
You being a guest and that you at least put yourself out there.
Well, thanks for having me on.
No, it's always great to have you on. Andy, anything else for Mr. Fitzsimmons?
No,
All
I'm
right.
good.
Always a pleasure. Tune in next week to Capital Conversations, where we'll have a couple of lawmakers here debating the amendment issues and discussing what's the latest goings on up here at the Capitol. We'll have some political pundits, and we'll have a special musical group here next week to bring you some for your listening pleasure. David, what do you think?
Yeah, but I'm not in the musical group.
Not yet.
No.
I mean, what can you play?
Can
anything?
you play an instrument?
Can we see? Can Dave? Can you
Dance a
show us
jig?
your? Can you show? Yeah, an Irish jig. Can you show David's boots here? He's got the. He wore his. His.
Those are slick
These
boots.
Yeah.
are my fancy boots.
like
Those are.
Yes.
Those ain't hog
These are my
farming
going
boots,
to town
yeah?
boots.
No, yeah.
I love it. All right, for Senator
Ben Cruz.
Ben Cruz, I almost called him Bob. I'm
from-
sorry.
Yes, Brooklyn Park.
Ben Cruz from Brooklyn Park, and for our special guest David Fitzsimmons, who is running for office out in the Wright County area under the Republican banner, and for my co-host, the lovely Andy Friedel, lovely and talented. I'm Marty Owings, and for our producer, Catherine Loudenslager, Matt Ealing, for our assistant producers, Susan Miracle and Connor Malloy. So long until next week.
Good night.